Hey everybody, it's Jim from Cigars, and I'm not doing a review, but I am smoking a Arturo Fuente Hemingway short story today. And the reason I'm smoking this one is this has actually been aged for 3 years in my humidor. And that's a long story, I'll get to it later. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is resting and aging cigars. And they really are two different things. So let's talk about resting first. Resting is where you give your cigars a chance to acclimate to your humidor and also to correct things that may have happened, minor things due to like poor storage and not quite the right temperature and humidity, or transit, or things like that. Really, resting is something that you can accomplish. It depends on the cigar, and all this stuff's going to be subjective. You be you and kind of make your own decisions because it's more of an art than a science. But resting is really a pretty short-term process. Experts say that you can acclimate a cigar to your humidor in 3 or 4 days. So that's all it takes to do that part of it. If you have some transit involved or it was in a cigar store that you're not quite sure how it was handled, then you want to rest it a little bit longer. They recommend up to maybe 3 weeks or so as a maximum. I did see one recommendation, it was kind of interesting. Take the transit time times 2 as your minimum resting period. So in other words, if they took 4 days to get to you, give your cigars at least 8 days to rest. But you don't have to rest them 6 months or 8 months or 12 months or anything like that, unless they're Cuban cigars. Then you do have to do that. But we're talking about New World cigars here, generally speaking. When it comes to resting, keep in mind that the average time from harvest to getting onto the retailer shelf or to your mail order place that a tobacco leaf is aged is 3 years. It takes 3 years to go from picking it to getting it on the shelf. So the cigar leaf is naturally aged over a period of time. And companies like Perdomo and Padron and Plasencia, My Father, Arturo Fuente are known for aging all of their tobacco before it's rolled into cigars. There isn't any reason for New World cigars to think that you have to age it for a year or 2 years or something like that. Also, the vast majority of New World cigars are aged or wicked for a period of time, up to maybe a year, before they're actually shipped out. There's a lot of aging that goes on behind the scenes. And then we get to the retail shelf or to the mail order warehouse, and who knows how long they might be sitting there. That's why you really don't have to worry too much about resting your cigars. But you be you, rest them for as long as you feel comfortable doing. But actually, 3 weeks or so is about the optimum period to do it. All right, let's talk about aging, which is a different thing. In aging, what we're doing is giving the cigars a long time on the shelf for the purpose of actually changing the character of the cigar, which means giving the oils a chance from the different cigar components, a chance to intermingle and mix and basically have the tobacco mellow out. And a lot of the fans of aging cigars for a long time say it changes the character of the cigar significantly in terms of making it more and more mellow. So I got to tell you the story of this Arturo Fuente Hemingway short story. I bought a box of these during the height of the pandemic in October of 2020. And if you recall that time, most of the cigar operations were shut down. It was pretty hard to get cigars, actually. And I got an email that they were selling boxes of Arturo Fuente short story. And I jumped on that. And I got to say, I smoked a couple right away, and they were awful. They were terrible, terrible draw. The taste was harsh. I'm going, these are supposed to be Cameroons. They're supposed to be nice and mellow and really good tasting. And they were terrible. So I started spacing them out a little bit. And I got to say, most of them that I smoked were pretty bad. And now here's one that's been sitting for 3 years. And I'm going to tell you, this is very good. This is exactly what I expected in this cigar. Basically everything changed about the cigar. The draw, the taste, everything. It's rather amazing. But if you're like me, I bet you've aged some cigars because they call it accidental aging. And that's where you forget about cigars. You maybe buy a box or a 5-pack or something, and you smoke almost all of them, and there's one or two left over, and you say, you got kind of sick of them, and so you forget about them, and they end up way back in your humidor. And all of a sudden, a year or two later, or 3 years, you find them. And that's accidental aging. That's really not the way to do it. We'll talk about some of the tips for aging, but that does happen. How long should you age cigars for? Minimum 6 months and up to about 3 years for New World cigars. And again, we're not talking about Cubans here. That's an entirely different story. But for New World cigars, 6 months to 3 years is about optimum. But I want to stress, you don't have to age them. Probably the biggest way to piss off a master blender is to say, oh, hey, I'm going to age your cigars 3 years because I'm not sure they're going to be good right away. They would take offense to that. A little bit of a story about E.P. Carrillo is when he came out with the Encore, which of course I think was the #1 cigar of the year in 2018. But he actually announced that cigar in 2016 and decided to hold back and age the tobacco for another year because he wasn't happy with the cigar at that point in time. So they actually held off a year before they released cigars for production. If you ever should run into a master blender, watch what you say. But anyway, you be you. If you feel like aging cigars, here's some tips to do that. One thing you should do, and I got to be honest, I didn't do it with this cigar, is try to segregate the ones you're aging in a certain part of your humidor and keep them away from the other ones. That's it. That's what the experts say to do, so we'll stick with that. And also, of course, make sure that you're storing them as close to 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 65 to 70% relative humidity. That's also important. You don't want to ruin them by storing them in poor conditions. A good way to test out whether aging works for a particular cigar is maybe buy a box, or if you don't want to pop for that, buy a 5-pack and smoke one the first week or two. Do the usual resting period that you do for it, and then smoke one and make some notes as to taste and so forth. And then a month later, smoke another one, and maybe 45 days later, smoke another one, and work your way so you're at 6 to 8 months of before you get to the end ones, and then see if there's any difference, if that cigar responds to aging. Not all cigars respond the same to aging, and different vitolas respond differently. But it's a good experiment to try if you want to get into aging your cigars. So that's all I got for today. Jim from Cigars. I will see you next time.